Good day. A media group in the President's Office, U.S. Mercantile Goals, Ukrainian Security Service Women in Court Services, a new IMF memorandum and a $44.9 billion aid package to Kyiv. These are other rumors, gossip, insiders and opinions that were discussed on the sidelines of the Ukrainian authorities December 23. Analysis. Analyzing what is happening in Ukraine with the energy crisis, when Ukrainians begin to knock on each other and slander for the lights on, and also try to survive by thinking of how to charge the phone from a bicycle, we come to the conclusion that in the future we will face a food crisis, where Ukrainians they will start knocking on each other, who will have 3 spikelets at home and figure out how to make food out of waste. The future of the country is seen as very tragic, as the country has long been drawn into the spiral of death. Every year is worse than the last. Gossip. The Office of the President has a separate group of media experts whose task is to extinguish crises and distract the masses from pressing problems. For example, Ukrainians are now gradually being taught that tariffs should be raised. This is required by the IMF. Tariffs for electricity and gas will be raised in 2023 by at least 100%. In order to extinguish such negatives within the country, they are pumping up the topic of aggravation in the war. The war is needed by the political elite, which can easily attribute all failures and mischief to the war. Don't take out the trash? Didn't clean up the hallway? No lighting? A mess in government agencies? Bureaucracy? Prices are rising? Are the rates going up? No work? Lawlessness and lawlessness? Chaos everywhere? Be quiet, don't rock the boat, otherwise you're helping the enemy. Somewhere this is how the life hack used by Bankova looks like. Layout. It is beginning to dawn on many that in the Ukrainian crisis, the United States is pursuing purely its own mercantile goals. It's just good intentions. It has happened so often in history. The EU is trying to get out of this mess, but the current leaders are too weak. 2023 will be even more difficult for the EU than 2022. For example, the Global Times writes that the US authorities want to weaken Russia and European countries by continuing to supply arms to Ukraine and thus prolonging the crisis in Europe. US targets can be easily seen. 1. Move the energy resources of the Russian Federation away from the EU, then weaken your ally. In 2022, the EU lost €1 trillion due to energy prices. 2. Weaken the EU industry, drag many Euro producers to itself or to controlled countries. 3. Upgrade your military-industrial complex. 4. Distribute loans to everyone in order to put everyone on the dollar needle even more strongly. 5. Upgrade your corporations. For example, the Russian Federation has dropped out of the game due to sanctions. The EU cannot because of tariffs. An image of an enemy is being formed around China and bans are being gently introduced. The goal is to bring only your corporations to the top. There is a struggle in the world for the control and domination of certain clans and transnational corporations. Everything else is an illusion of deception and tinsel for biomass. Ukraine is a tool of the game that will be played as long as there is a need for it. Then they merge and forget. Inside. The source said that the Security Service of Ukraine and the main Directorate of Intelligence actively use Ukrainian girls in their work, primarily those who work in escort services. The statements of the acting head of the Security Service of Ukraine, Malyuk, reveal the whole range of work of Ukrainian women. I would like to note the female agents of the Security Service of Ukraine. This is aerobatics. They work behind enemy lines, some have already gone through plastic surgery, changing personal data. Since 2014, a special program has been created that made it possible to educate and acquaint Ukrainian women in Russia with the right men. Many of the girls worked under the cover of political journalists or public figures, which allowed them to quickly find contact with the right officials/politicians in the Kremlin who oversaw the Ukrainian issue. Backstage rumors. There were rumors in the lobby that the Office of the President ordered the oligarchs to pay tacit contributions to help the army. Where this money goes, no one knows. Who does not fold, he has problems. He immediately remembers everything. Layout. The case with the audit of the transfer of aid to Ukraine will be relevant closer to the US presidential election. Many point out that this will be almost a headlining theme of Republicans versus Democrats. Since the Democrats are now using the Ukrainian crisis as their trump card in political games, their achievement. In the future, we will learn a lot, who and how much he took, where he sent it and with whom he was in share. Perhaps we are waiting for the exposure of the corruption scandal of the century. War is war, but enslavement is by order. Ukraine has signed a new memorandum with the IMF. The terms of the new memorandum with the IMF, already signed by Zelensky, Shmyhal and Paishny. Refusal of issuance financing of the budget. Abolition of the simplified taxation system. Refund of tax audits. Control of cash registers. How to use them in the absence of light throughout the country is not indicated. Strengthening tax administration. Reduction by 27% of the cost of wages for employees of the public sector. Moreover, the reduction will be achieved both by reducing salaries and by reducing the number of state employees. Prepare for teachers and doctors. A moratorium on increasing any social benefits other than pensions. And this is despite inflation of 30% this year and 22.5% next year. Appointment of a new supervisory board of Naftogaz. Corporatization of Energoatom. Interestingly, the IMF has no faith left in the Ukrainian authorities. IMF financing will now operate exclusively on the principle of chairs in the morning, money in the evening. That is, at first the IMF will wait for the fulfillment of the terms of the memorandum, and only then fulfill its conditions for granting loans. Gossip. There was gossip that the president's office had already discussed the issue that the Russians, in response to the sabotage of the Ukrainian special services and missile attacks on Russian VIPs, could in the near future launch a demonstrative missile attack on some decision-making center. This is either the Ministry of Defense, or the main directorate of Rakvidka, the Security Service of Ukraine, the Cabinet of Ministers, the Office of the President. The option was also considered that the Russian Federation could now also begin to hunt down VIP persons in Ukraine and destroy them. On a conference call, everyone was advised to be careful. Inside, MI6 relayed intelligence to the Office of the President and the General Staff that Russian forces would continue to strike critical infrastructure in Kyiv. Back in October, the Kremlin adopted a strategy to destroy the energy system of the capital of Ukraine, which means that the blackout will become a permanent phenomenon for Kyiv. The United States continues to bring the Ukrainian crisis to a freeze. Leading publications of America speak about it. The course of hostilities in Ukraine is turning in favor of Russia, and Kyiv will soon find itself in a dead end, writes the New York Times. With the military conflict in Ukraine soon entering its second year, it will be much more difficult for Ukrainian troops to retake territory from Russian forces. Despite Russian attacks on civilian power sources, Ukraine has maintained some momentum on the front lines since September. But the tide of the conflict is likely to change in the coming months as Russia significantly beefs up its defenses and deploys more soldiers to the front lines. Because of this, it will be more difficult for Ukraine to regain those vast tracts of territory that it lost this year, according to the US government. All these factors make the most likely scenario of the second year of the military conflict, which will be characterized by a stalemate. Zelensky, at meetings with Biden and congressmen, told them that Ukraine was capable of winning a complete victory in the war. The Washington Post writes about this, citing sources in the Biden administration. However, according to the interlocutors, Ukraine's complete victory on the battlefield is considered unlikely in the United States. Backstage rumors. In the lobby, there were rumors that the Office of the President had set the task for the military enlistment offices for December and January to mobilize more than 50,000 new soldiers. So the military commissars ran to work out the plan and catch the peasants. Layout. Good news for the Office of the President. U.S. congressmen approved the country's draft budget for fiscal year 2023 of about $1.7 trillion with a $44.9 billion aid package for Kyiv. Hurry to give it to us. They benefit from such a course of events, they pursue their own goals, and so far there is no point in them, the complete victory of Ukraine. The war will be long. There were rumors on the sidelines that the money allocated by the West would be enough for 6 to 9 months. Everyone points out the reason: the fall of the domestic economy and the need to finance the budget by 90% from external injections. For example, officials of the Office of the President are already saying that the fall in real production in Ukraine in the fourth quarter is on average 70%, some sectors will fall to 90%. In 2023, the situation will not improve, but on the contrary, problems will accumulate and worsen the economy. Most likely, the Office of the President will once again be forced to lower the hryvnia in order to save on payments to the armed forces, pensioners, state employees, and so on. In short, the people will be robbed again. No matter how many loans the West allocates, this will not be felt by ordinary Ukrainians, who are getting poorer and poorer. Ukraine is slowly turning into ruins, and even if the war ends tomorrow, the old Ukraine will no longer exist, and Ukrainians will have to repay loans worth $200 billion. And lastly, in Kyiv, stop the work of all ground electric transport, Mayor Klitschko reports. The stoppage of work is connected with a serious shortage of electricity in the capital. See you soon.